The eviction notice was taped to the door when Maya Chen got home from her night shift at the hospital. Bright orange paper that screamed, "Final warning," in letters designed to humiliate. Her daughter Sophie pressed against her leg, 6 years old, and already learning that shame came in official envelopes and legal threats. "Mommy, what's that?" Maya pulled the notice down quickly, folding it so Sophie couldn't see the numbers. 30 days to vacate. For months of unpaid rent. Legal action pending. Just junk mail, baby. Let's get you ready for bed. Their apartment was small, a one-bedroom walk-up in a building where the heat worked half the time and the landlord answered calls never. But it was theirs, or had been, until Maya's ex-husband David stopped sending child support and the medical bills from Sophie's emergency appendectomy 6 months ago had swallowed every dollar Maya could earn. She worked as a nursing assistant at County General, overnight shifts that paid $18 an hour and destroyed her back. Most mornings, she came home too exhausted to do more than collapse on the couch while Sophie got herself ready for school. The guilt of that, of failing her daughter in small ways that accumulated into something massive, was heavier than the exhaustion. Sophie climbed into bed, clutching the stuffed panda she'd named Mr. Whiskers. The toy was missing an eye, and half its stuffing leaked from a seam Maya kept meaning to sew but never had time to fix. "Tell me a story about Daddy." Maya's chest tightened. "It's late, sweetie. You need to sleep. Please. Just one." What story could she tell? That David had left them 2 years ago for a woman he met at work? That he'd promised to help with rent and then changed his number? That the last time Sophie had seen her father, he'd forgotten her birthday and brought a gift meant for a 3-year-old? Once upon a time, there was a brave girl who was stronger than she knew. And she didn't need anyone else to be happy because she had her mom who loved her more than the whole world. Sophie's eyes were already closing. "That's not a story about Daddy." "I know, baby. Sleep now." Maya sat in the dark, listening to Sophie's breathing even out, and opened the eviction notice with shaking hands. The numbers blurred through tears she refused to let fall until she was sure Sophie was asleep. $4,000 in back rent. Another $2,000 in late fees and court costs if she didn't vacate voluntarily. $6,000 she didn't have and couldn't earn fast enough. Her phone buzzed. A text from David's new number, the third one he'd used this year to avoid her calls. "Can't do child support this month. Karen is pregnant, and we have expenses. You understand?" Maya understood perfectly. She understood that some people could walk away from their responsibilities and sleep fine at night. She understood that the legal system moved too slowly to help when you needed it most. She understood that being a good mother meant working 3 jobs if necessary and never letting Sophie see her break. She deleted the text and pulled up her bank account. $247.32. Enough for maybe 2 weeks of groceries if she stretched every dollar until it screamed. The letter arrived 3 days later, different from the eviction notice. This envelope was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with her name written in elegant script across the front. Maya Chen, spelled correctly, which was rare enough to make her pause. Inside was a letter from an attorney in upstate New York. "Dear Miss Chen, I am writing on behalf of the estate of Margaret Liang, who passed away on October 3, 2024. According to her last will and testament, executed in 1999 and updated most recently this past July, you have been named as the sole beneficiary of her primary asset, a commercial property located at 847 Riverside Road in the township of Millbrook, approximately 300 miles from your current residence." Maya read the paragraph twice. Margaret Liang. The name pulled at something in her memory, dusty and half forgotten. Her grandmother's sister. Maya had met her once at a family gathering when she was maybe 8 years old. A tall woman with kind eyes who'd given her a jade bracelet and told her to be brave. The letter continued. The property consists of a 45,000 square foot silk factory built in 1923, sitting on 8 acres of land. The building has been vacant since 1987 and requires significant restoration work. Mrs. Liang left specific instructions that the property be transferred to you immediately upon her death with no conditions attached. She also left a personal note, which I have enclosed. Maya's hands trembled as she unfolded the second piece of paper. The handwriting was shaky but determined. "Maya, we met only once when you were very young. You probably don't remember me. I was your grandmother's older sister, though we stopped speaking long before you were born. I followed your life from a distance through the few family connections I maintained. Through Christmas cards your mother used to send before cancer took her. Through newspaper clippings when you graduated nursing school. Through the cousin who told me about your divorce and your struggles. I know what your family thinks of you. I know how they've treated you for marrying outside our culture, for having a daughter out of wedlock by their standards, for failing to live up to their expectations. I know because they did the same to me 70 years ago. I married an Italian man, my family considered beneath us. I chose love over their approval. They erased me for it, just as they've erased you. But I built something beautiful anyway. And now it's yours. The factory is old and neglected. It will require work, vision, and courage to see what it could become. But it's paid for, it's solid, and it's yours. Do with it what you will. Live in it. Sell it. Transform it into something new. Just know that someone saw you, Maya. Someone knew you were worth more than they said you were. With love from a stranger who understands, Margaret. Maya read the letter 5 times, tears streaming down her face. A factory. 8 acres. A life she couldn't even imagine. The attorney's number was at the bottom of the first letter. Maya called immediately, her voice shaking. Morrison and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with someone about Margaret Liang's estate. This is Maya Chen. One moment, please. A man's voice came on the line, warm and professional. Miss Chen, I'm James Morrison. I'm so glad you called. Mrs. Liang was very specific about her wishes. I don't understand. Why me? I barely knew her. Morrison was quiet for a moment. She left me a letter, too. She told me you'd ask that, and she told me to tell you this, because everyone deserves to be chosen at least once. Maya's throat closed up. What's the property worth? The factory itself, in its current condition, probably $200,000 to $300,000. The land is worth more, maybe $500,000 total if you sold to a developer. But Mrs. Liang didn't want you to sell. She wanted you to see it first. I can't afford to drive 300 miles. Mrs. Liang anticipated that. Her estate includes $5,000 in cash specifically designated for your initial expenses. Transportation, lodging, whatever you need to visit the property and make informed decisions about it. Maya sat down on the couch, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. This isn't real. Things like this don't happen to people like me. They do, Miss Chen. They just did. The property is yours free and clear. No mortgage, no liens, no debts attached. I've already filed the transfer papers. All you need to do is come collect the keys. After she hung up, Maya sat in the silence of her apartment and let herself feel it. Hope, dangerous and intoxicating, flooding through her chest. A factory, property, a future that wasn't just survival. Sophie emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mommy, why are you crying? Maya pulled her daughter close. Because something good happened, baby. Something really, really good. What happened? We're going on an adventure. Maya called her supervisor at the hospital and used 3 days of vacation time she'd been saving for an emergency. This qualified. She withdrew $300 from the account Morrison had. Established, filled the car with gas, and packed 2 duffel bags with everything they'd need for a few days away. Sophie bounced in her seat, asking questions Maya couldn't answer yet. Where are we going? To see a building that belongs to us now. Like a house. Like a factory. Where people use to make beautiful silk cloth. What's silk? It's fabric made by silkworms. They spin cocoons and people collect the thread. Sophie wrinkled her nose. That's weird. Maya laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd laughed? Yeah, baby. It's pretty weird. They left at dawn. Maya navigating highway traffic with the GPS on her phone directing her north. The eviction notice sat in her bag, but for the first time in months, Maya wasn't thinking about it. She was thinking about possibilities, about what a factory could become, about whether this was the miracle she'd stopped believing in. The drive took 6 hours with stops for bathroom breaks, and the cheap lunch Maya splurged on at a rest stop. Sophie talked the entire way, telling stories about school and her best friend Emma, and the cat that lived behind their apartment building. Maya listened and drove and felt something loosening in her chest. For 6 hours, She wasn't a failure or a burden or a disappointment. She was just a mother driving her daughter towards something unknown, but maybe, possibly, good. Millbrook appeared like something from a postcard. Main Street lined with historic buildings, trees turning orange and red with autumn, a town square with a gazebo, and a bronze statue of someone long dead. Maya followed the GPS to Riverside Road, watching the town give way to industrial remnants. Old warehouses and factories, some converted to lofts and art galleries, others abandoned and sagging. 847 Riverside Road sat at the end of the street like a monument to another era. Maya killed the engine and stared. The building was massive, 5 stories of red brick with huge windows running along every floor. Some were broken, some boarded, some just empty holes staring out at the October afternoon. The roof sagged in the middle but held at the edges. Vines covered the east wall, thick as cables, turning the brick into something organic and alive. A rusted sign hung above the main entrance, letters barely visible, Liang and Son Silk Company, St. 1923. "Mommy," Sophie whispered. "It's huge." "Yeah, baby. It really is." They got out of the car, and Maya felt the weight of the place settle over her. This wasn't just a building. It was history, legacy. A life's work left to decay when Margaret's family had rejected her. The keys Morrison had mailed fit perfectly in the padlock securing the main door. The lock clicked open, and Maya pushed against what that hadn't moved in decades. The door swung inward with a groan that sounded almost human. They stepped inside, and Maya's breath caught. The entrance hall opened into a vast space, the main factory floor. 50 feet high, with iron support columns rising like trees. The floor was concrete, cracked but solid, covered in dust and debris, and the remnants of machinery long removed. But the light, even with broken windows and years of grime, the afternoon sun poured through those huge windows and turned everything golden. Dust motes danced in the beams like snow. "It's beautiful," Sophie breathed. And it was. Beneath the decay and neglect, Maya could see what it had been. A place where hundreds of people had worked, had created beauty from nothing but silk thread and human hands. They explored carefully, Maya holding Sophie's hand tight. The ground floor was mostly empty except for a few broken crates and rusted tools. Stairs led to the upper floors, wide, industrial stairs with iron railings worn smooth by decades of workers climbing up and down. The second floor held offices, small rooms with desks still in place, paper scattered across floors that had warped from water damage. Maya found a ledger dated 1985, the last entries showing declining orders and mounting debts. The third floor was where the magic had happened. Massive looms still stood in rows, silent giants that had once woven silk into cloth worth fortunes. The machines were rusted and probably worthless, but their presence told the story of what this place had been. Sophie wandered between the looms, running her fingers along metal frames. "Can we live here?" Maya looked around at the industrial wreckage, the broken windows, the spaces that hadn't seen heat or electricity in decades. "I don't think so, baby. This isn't really a house. We could make it a house. Put beds here." Sophie pointed to a corner. "And a kitchen there. And we could have a cat finally because there's so much space." The innocence of it, the complete faith that any space could become home if you just decided it should be, made Maya's chest ache. "Maybe. Let's see the rest first." The fourth floor was smaller, divided into storage rooms. Most were empty, but one held wooden crates marked finished goods stacked floor to ceiling. Maya pried one open. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was silk fabric. Deep crimson, hand-embroidered with golden chrysanthemums. Even after 40 years, the quality was obvious. This wasn't mass-produced cloth. This was art. "It's pretty." Sophie touched it gently, her small fingers careful. Maya found more crates, each filled with fabric in different colors and patterns. Purple with silver cranes, midnight blue with white plum blossoms, emerald green with jade dragons. Dozens of bolts, maybe hundreds, all abandoned when the factory closed, all forgotten when Margaret had retreated from a family that rejected her. "This is worth something," Maya whispered. "This has to be worth something." The fifth floor was locked. Maya tried every key on the ring Morrison had sent, but none fit the heavy iron door at the top of the stairs. She pressed her ear against it, hearing nothing but silence. Why is it locked? Sophie asked. I don't know, baby. Maybe it's just storage. We'll figure it out. They descended back to the main floor as the sun started setting, painting the factory floor in shades of orange and gold. Maya stood in the center of that vast space and felt possibility opening up like a flower. She could sell the factory, take the $500,000, and find a better life for Sophie. Put her in good schools, buy a house, stop working night shifts that destroyed her body and stole time with her daughter. Or she could do something else. Something Margaret had wanted. Transform this place into something new. But transform it into what? Her phone buzzed. David again. Heard you came into some money. Karen says we need to discuss increasing child support now that you can afford it. Maya stared at the text in disbelief. She hadn't told anyone about the inheritance. How did he know? A second text came through. Your cousin Jennifer mentioned it. Said your family is talking about you again. Making jokes about the charity case getting a condemned building. Of course. Her family. The relatives who'd stopped inviting her to holidays after the divorce, who'd made it clear that Maya marrying David Chun had been a mistake. Not because David was cruel, but because he was Chinese American and Maya's traditional family had expected better. Now they were circling like vultures, waiting to see what she'd do with this unexpected gift, so they could mock her for that too. Maya deleted both texts and blocked the number. Again. Mommy, I'm hungry. They found a diner in town, a small place called Ruby's with checkered tablecloths, and a waitress who looked at them with open curiosity. You're not from around here? Maya ordered carefully, calculating costs in her head. Just visiting. Came to see the old silk factory. The waitress's expression shifted, softening. You're Margaret's girl. The one she left it to. You knew her. Everyone in town knew Margaret. She was a good woman. Kept to herself after her husband died, but she always helped when people needed it. Donated to the library, paid for school supplies when families couldn't afford them. The waitress set down 2 glasses of water. Shame about what her family did to her. What did they do? Cut her off for marrying an Italian boy back in the 40s. She was supposed to marry some rich Chinese businessman her father had picked out. When she refused, they treated her like she was dead. Never spoke to her again. The waitress leaned closer. But Tony Moretti treated her like a queen. They built that factory together from nothing. Made it successful despite her family trying to sabotage them. When Tony died in '85, Margaret couldn't keep running it alone. She closed the doors and just waited. Waited for what? For you, I think. She told me once that family wasn't about blood. It was about choosing to love people who'd been cast out just like you were. The waitress smiled. Welcome to Millbrook, Maya Chen. Your aunt wanted you here. After Sophie fell asleep that night in their motel room, Maya sat by the window and looked at the factory in the distance, its silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. Margaret had waited 39 years for someone worthy of her legacy. Someone who understood rejection and rebuilding. Someone who wouldn't sell it to the highest bidder, but would see what it could become. The question was, what could it become? Maya pulled out her phone and started researching. Silk factory conversions, historic building renovations, commercial property values in Millbrook. She found examples of factories transformed into apartment buildings, art galleries, event spaces, restaurants. Each one required capital Maya didn't have, loans she couldn't qualify for, experience she didn't possess. But she also found something else. Tax incentives for historic preservation, grants for women-owned businesses, community development programs for rural revitalization. Possibilities. Not easy ones. Not guaranteed. But possibilities nonetheless. At 2 a.m., Maya finally closed her laptop and lay in the motel bed beside Sophie, staring at the ceiling. She could do this. Maybe. Possibly. If she was brave enough to try. If she was willing to fail in spectacular fashion. If she could transform a factory full of dust and broken machines into something that would prove to everyone, her family, David, herself, that being chosen once was enough. Maya woke to sunlight streaming through thin motel curtains and Sophie's voice, urgent and excited. Mommy, wake up. There's a man outside looking at our car. Maya bolted upright, her heart hammering. Through the window, she could see a figure circling her Toyota, taking photographs with his phone. He was maybe 50, wearing khakis and a polo shirt, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. She pulled on jeans and hurried outside, leaving Sophie with strict instructions to lock the door. "Can I help you?" The man turned, smile already in place. "You must be Maya Chen. I'm Robert Hastings. I represent Riverside Development Group." He extended a business card. "We've been interested in the Liang property for years. I'd like to make you an offer. The property isn't for sale. You haven't heard my offer yet." Hastings gestured toward the factory, visible a few blocks away. "That building is a liability. Asbestos, lead paint, structural damage. You're looking at $1 million in renovations minimum before it's usable. That's if the roof doesn't collapse first." Maya crossed her arms. "I just inherited it. How do you even know about this?" Small town. News travels fast. Especially news about someone inheriting one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in Millbrook. His smile never wavered. "I'm prepared to offer you $800,000. Cash. Close in 30 days. Maya's breath caught. $800,000. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Enough to solve every problem, erase every debt, give Sophie the life she deserved. "I need to think about it." "Of course. But I should mention, we have partners waiting. If this deal doesn't close quickly, they might lose interest. And then you're left with a building you can't afford to maintain and can't sell for anywhere near this price." Hastings pressed his card into her hand. "Call me when you're ready to be realistic about your situation." He walked away, leaving Maya standing in the motel parking lot with her hands shaking and doubt creeping through her chest like ice water. Sophie opened the motel door. "Mommy, who was that man?" "Someone who wants to buy the factory. Are you going to sell it?" Maya looked at her daughter's face, open and trusting, believing that her mother would make the right choice because mothers always did. "I don't know yet, baby. Let's go have breakfast and think about it." They ate at Ruby's again. The same waitress, her name tag read Carol, brought coffee without being asked and gave Sophie extra pancakes. "Robert Hastings found you already, I see." Carol refilled Maya's cup. "Vultures don't waste time. He offered me $800,000. "I bet he did. You know what he didn't tell you." Maya waited. "That property is zoned for mixed-use commercial. It's one of only 3 locations in town that can support large-scale development. Hastings has been trying to buy it for 15 years. Margaret refused every offer." Carol leaned closer. "Last year he offered her $1.2 million. She still said no." "Why would she refuse that much money?" "Because she knew what he'd do with it. Tear down the factory, build luxury condos that locals can't afford, price out the families who've lived here for generations." Margaret didn't want that. She wanted someone who'd preserve what she and Tony built. Maya felt the weight of that expectation settling on her shoulders. "I'm a nursing assistant. I don't know anything about historic preservation or running a business." Margaret didn't know anything either when she started. She learned. Carol topped off the coffee again. "Question is, are you willing to learn, or are you going to take the easy money and let Hastings erase everything she worked for?" The words stung because they were true. $800,000 was easy. It was safe. It was the rational choice for someone with $247 in the bank and an eviction notice in her bag. But it was also surrender. After breakfast, Maya drove back to the factory with Sophie chattering beside her about the pancakes and whether they could get a cat and if the factory had enough room for a trampoline. Maya barely heard her. Her mind was calculating impossible math. If she kept the factory, she'd need to repair the roof first, probably $100,000 minimum. Then address the broken windows, the water damage, the decades of neglect. She'd need architects, contractors, permits, inspections. She'd need money. She didn't have an expertise she couldn't fake. The factory looked different in morning light. Less magical, more daunting. 50,000 square feet of problems wrapped in red brick and false hope. Maya unlocked the main door again, and they stepped inside. Sophie ran ahead, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. "Mommy, look! There's a bird!" A pigeon was perched on one of the iron support columns, watching them with the bored expression of a long-time resident who'd seen intruders come and go. Maya walked slowly across the factory floor, her footsteps kicking up dust. In the daylight, she could see more details. The floor wasn't just cracked. Sections had buckled from water damage. The iron columns showed rust, especially near the base where moisture had collected. The ceiling was stained brown and black, where the roof had leaked for years. This wasn't a diamond in the rough. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Chen, this is Rachel Kim from Millbrook Historical Society. Carol at Ruby's gave me your number. I'd love to discuss the Liang factory with you. Coffee this afternoon. Maya stared at the message. People kept finding her, kept wanting to talk, kept pushing her toward decisions she wasn't ready to make. She texted back. 2 p.m.? Ruby's. The response came immediately. Perfect. See you then. Sophie had found a stick and was poking at debris in the corner, narrating an elaborate story about treasure hunters and secret passages. Baby, don't touch anything. There might be sharp metal or broken glass. I'm being careful. I'm looking for clues. Clues to what? To why that door upstairs is locked. There's got to be something important up there. Maya had forgotten about the 5th floor. The locked door that none of her keys would open. It's probably just more storage. Old files or equipment. Or treasure. Sophie's eyes went wide. Like in the stories you tell me. The princess finds the locked door and behind it is. Real life isn't like stories, Sophie. But sometimes it is. You said something good happened. You said we're on an adventure. Her daughter's voice went small. Isn't this an adventure? Maya knelt beside her, pulling her close. Yeah, baby. It is. I'm sorry. I'm just worried about making the right choice. The right choice is to stay. I like it here. It's not that simple. Why not? Because we're poor, Maya wanted to say. Because I'm one emergency away from total collapse. Because I've been surviving by my fingernails for 2 years, and I'm so tired of struggling. Because $800,000 would solve everything, and keeping this factory would mean years more of uncertainty and fear. But she couldn't say any of that to a 6-year-old who believed that wanting something hard enough could make it happen. Let me think about it, okay? We'll figure it out together. They spent the morning exploring more carefully. Maya took photographs of every room, every damaged section, every problem she could identify. The list grew longer with each floor. 2nd floor. Severe water damage, windows need replacing, electrical system probably not up to code. 3rd floor. Looms taking up valuable space, structural concerns with how much weight they add, floor warping near the west wall. 4th floor. Those crates of silk fabric might be worth something, but how much? And who would buy 40-year-old cloth, no matter how beautiful? 5th floor. Still locked, still mysterious. By noon, Maya had documented at least $500,000 in obvious repairs. Probably closer to $1 million once she got professionals to assess everything properly. Hastings was right. This building was a liability, not an asset. She was about to leave when Sophie called from near the main staircase. Mommy, I found something. Maya hurried over. Sophie was crouched near the base of the stairs, pointing at what looked like a small metal panel set into the concrete floor. What is that? Maya knelt and brushed away dust. The panel was maybe 2 feet square, with a handle recessed into its surface. She pulled, and it lifted with a groan of protesting metal. Beneath was a compartment about 3 feet deep. Inside were metal boxes, the kind used for fireproof document storage. Maya pulled one out and opened it. Papers, yellowed with age. She unfolded one carefully. It was a blueprint. Original architectural drawings for the factory, dated 1923. Detailed plans showing every floor, every room, every structural element. These are incredible, Maya whispered. These show exactly how the building was designed. She pulled out another box. Inside were photographs, black and white images of the factory in its prime. Workers, mostly women, standing at the looms. Finished silk fabric displayed in showrooms. Margaret and Tony, young and smiling, standing in front of the building on opening day. Sophie leaned against her, looking at the photographs. Is that great Aunt Margaret? Yeah, baby. When she was about my age. In the photograph, Margaret wore simple work clothes but carried herself with pride. Tony stood beside her with his arm around her waist. Both of them looked at the camera with expressions that said, "We built this. Against all odds, we built this." Maya found more boxes. Financial records, showing the factory's success through the 1940s and 50s. Awards for quality silk production. Letters from clients praising Liang and Sons for exceptional craftsmanship. This hadn't been just a factory. It had been a dream made real. Two people rejected by their families, creating something beautiful together. And now it was Maya's. This whole complicated, expensive, impossible dream. She carefully replaced everything except one photograph, Margaret and Tony on their wedding day. She tucked it in her pocket. Come on, we have a meeting. Rachel Kim was already waiting at Ruby's when Maya and Sophie arrived. She was maybe 40, Korean-American, wearing jeans and a Millbrook Historical Society t-shirt, with the kind of genuine smile that put Maya immediately at ease. Maya Chen, thank you for meeting me. She shook Maya's hand warmly, then crouched to Sophie's level. And you must be Sophie. Carol told me you're the brave explorer who discovered the silk factory. Sophie beamed. We found secret boxes under the floor. Did you? That's amazing. Rachel straightened. Can we talk while Sophie colors? I brought supplies. She pulled out a kid's menu and crayons. Sophie settled into the booth happily, already drawing what looked like a giant building with rainbow windows. Rachel ordered coffee for both of them, then pulled out a tablet. I'll get right to it. The Liang factory is one of the most historically significant buildings in this region. It's one of only 3 Chinese-American-owned silk factories that operated in New York State during the pre-war era. It's also one of the few that survived into the 1980s. She showed Maya photographs on the tablet, historical documentation, newspaper articles, census records. Margaret and Tony's story is remarkable. They met in 1943, when Tony was working construction and Margaret was doing bookkeeping for her father's import business. When they announced their engagement, both families disowned them. Margaret's because Tony was Italian. Tony's because Margaret wasn't Catholic. Rachel swiped to another image. So they left the city, came here to Millbrook, and started over. Borrowed money to buy this building. It was a failed textile mill. Converted it to silk production. Built the business through the war years and after. Why silk? Maya asked. Margaret had connections in China through her family's import business. She convinced Chinese silk producers to work with them despite her family's rejection. Tony handled the technical side, machinery, production, quality control. Together they made it work. Rachel's expression grew serious. But when Tony died in 1985, Margaret couldn't maintain production alone. She closed the factory and lived off savings. She could have sold to developers at any time. Robert Hastings has been making offers since 2009, each one higher than the last. Carol said Margaret refused $1.2 million. She did, because she was waiting for family. Not blood family, they still wanted nothing to do with her. But someone who understood what it meant to be rejected and to build something anyway. Rachel met Maya's eyes. She was waiting for you. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. I can't afford to restore this building. I'm a nursing assistant with $247 in the bank and an eviction notice in my bag. Hastings is offering $800,000. That would change my life. It would, and no one would blame you for taking it. Rachel leaned forward. But I want to show you something first. What this building could become with the right vision and resources. She pulled up images on her tablet. Other factories that had been converted. One into affordable housing, one into an art center, one into a mixed-use space with shops and restaurants and community spaces. Millbrook needs this. We're dying slowly. Young people leave because there are no jobs. Small businesses close because there's no foot traffic. The town square is half empty. Rachel's voice carried passion now. But that factory could anchor a revitalization. We've done economic studies. The right development could bring hundreds of jobs, support dozens of businesses, transform the entire downtown. That sounds amazing. For someone who knows what they're doing. The Historical Society can help. We have grant writers, architects who specialize in historic preservation, connections to investors who fund adaptive reuse projects. Rachel pulled out a folder. I took the liberty of researching funding options. There are federal historic preservation tax credits, 30% of qualified renovation costs, state grants for women-owned businesses, community development loans with favorable terms. Maya stared at the papers, numbers and percentages, and terms that might as well have been in another language. This is overwhelming. It is. But it's also possible. Rachel's hand covered Maya's. Margaret believed you could do this. She wouldn't have left you the factory otherwise. She saw something in you. The question is, do you see it in yourself? Sophie looked up from her coloring. Mommy's really strong. She works all night and never complains. She can do anything. The simple faith in her daughter's voice broke something open in Maya's chest. I need to think about it. Can I have a few days? Take whatever time you need. But know this, once Hastings gets that property, it's gone. The factory will be demolished within 6 months. All that history, all that potential, erased for luxury condos that will sit half empty because nobody local can afford them. After Rachel left, Maya and Sophie sat in the booth. Sophie went back to coloring while Maya stared at the paperwork, her mind spinning. Could she really do this? Transform a derelict factory into something meaningful? Her phone buzzed. David again, from yet another new number. Jennifer says the factory is worth millions. I'm filing for increased child support and back payment. You've been hiding assets. Maya deleted the text without responding. Her family was already circling, telling David about the inheritance, probably hoping he'd cause enough legal trouble that Maya would be forced to sell. They wanted her to fail. They expected it. Just like they'd expected her to fail when she married David, when she got pregnant, when she got divorced, when she took that nursing job instead of going back to college. Her whole life, she'd been proving them right by accepting their limitations as her own. What if she stopped? What if she chose to be brave like Margaret had been? Carol appeared with more coffee. You look like you're wrestling with something big. Robert Hastings offered me $800,000 for the factory. And you're tempted. I'd be stupid not to be. That's life-changing money. Carol sat down across from her, uninvited but welcome. Can I tell you something Margaret told me once? Maya nodded. She said the hardest part of building the factory wasn't the money or the work. It was the moment when she had to choose between safety and possibility. Her father offered her $50,000 to walk away from Tony, marry the man he'd chosen, come back to the family, forget this foolishness about loving who she wanted. What did she do? She told him to keep his money and his conditions. Married Tony anyway. Spent the first 5 years of their marriage, so poor they lived in a room above the factory. Ate rice and beans most nights. Worked 18-hour days. Carol's eyes held Maya's. But she was happy, because she'd chosen her own life instead of accepting the one they tried to force on her. And eventually, because she was brave enough to choose hard over easy, she built something extraordinary. I'm not Margaret. Maybe not. But you're someone Margaret believed in. Someone she chose. That's got to count for something. Maya looked at Sophie, still coloring, completely absorbed in creating her rainbow factory. What message did it send to take the money and run? That safety mattered more than dreams. That when life offered you a chance to build something, you should take the cash instead? Or what message did it send to gamble on an impossible factory restoration? That dreams mattered more than stability? That you should risk everything on possibilities when you had a child depending on you? I don't know what to do, Maya whispered. Yes, you do. You're just scared to admit it. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She stood at the motel window, staring at the factory silhouette against the night sky, and felt the weight of the decision crushing her. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and pulled out her laptop. She started researching everything Rachel had mentioned. Historic preservation tax credits, women-owned business grants, adaptive reuse success stories. The more she read, the more possible it seemed. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible. By dawn, Maya had filled a notebook with calculations and plans. If she could secure the tax credits, that would cover 30% of renovation costs. If she could get a community development loan at the rates Rachel mentioned, she could finance the rest. If she could find anchor tenants, businesses willing to commit to space once renovations were complete, she could show banks this wasn't just a fantasy. It would take years. It would mean moving to Millbrook, leaving behind her job at County General, uprooting Sophie from her school and friends. It would mean risking everything on a building that might collapse before she could save it. But it would also mean building something, creating something, honoring Margaret's faith in her by proving that yes, she could do this impossible thing. Sophie woke around 7, finding her mother surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. Did you sleep? Not really. I've been thinking. About the factory? Yeah, Sophie climbed onto the bed, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm. Are we keeping it? Maya looked at her daughter's face, open and hopeful, and trusting that whatever her mother decided would be right. I think so. Yeah, I think we're keeping it. Sophie threw her arms around Maya's neck. Really? Really, really? Really, really? But it's going to be hard. We'll have to move here. You'll have to change schools. We'll be working on this for a long time. That's okay. I like it here. And Carol said the school is good, and they have art class every day. Maya laughed despite her exhaustion. You've already been planning this? Just in case you made the right choice. They had breakfast at Ruby's again. Carol saw something in Maya's face and smiled. You're keeping it. I'm keeping it. Or trying to. I don't know if I can actually pull this off. You can. And you won't be alone. This whole town has been waiting for someone to save that factory. You're going to have more help than you know what to do with. Maya called Robert Hastings from the diner parking lot. Mr. Hastings, this is Maya Chen. Miss Chen, have you thought about my offer? I have. I'm not selling. Silence on the line. Then, that's a mistake. You're turning down $800,000 for a building that's going to bankrupt you. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. You'll regret this. Possibly. But I'd regret selling more. Thank you for your interest. She hung up before he could argue further. Rachel Kim answered on the first ring when Maya called her next. Rachel, it's Maya Chen. If your offer of help is still open, I'd like to take you up on it. Rachel's voice filled with warmth. It's absolutely still open. When can you meet? We have a lot of work to do. They spent the next 3 days in constant motion. Rachel introduced Maya to the mayor, the planning commission, the local bank president, and a dozen other people whose support they'd need. Everyone had the same reaction. Cautious optimism mixed with genuine excitement that someone was finally going to tackle the Liang factory restoration. The mayor, a woman named Patricia Okafor, pulled up development plans for downtown Millbrook. We've been trying to revitalize this area for 15 years. But without an anchor property, nothing works. If you can transform that factory into something viable, it changes everything. We can help with permits, tax abatements, infrastructure improvements. We want this to succeed. The bank president was more skeptical but intrigued. You have no collateral, no business experience, and you're proposing $1 million renovation. Normally I'd show you the door. But Rachel's vouching for you, the Historical Society is backing you, and frankly, we need this project. Let's talk about what's possible. By the end of the 3rd day, Maya had the skeleton of a plan. Phase 1, emergency stabilization. Shore up the roof, secure the building, address immediate safety concerns. Estimated cost, $150,000. Funding, historic preservation grant, already approved in principle, plus small business loan. Phase 2, detailed assessment and planning. Hire architects, engineers, contractors. Develop comprehensive renovation plans. Create tenant recruitment strategy. Estimated cost, $50,000. Funding, women-owned business grant, application in progress. Phase 3, major renovation. Full building restoration, dividing space into mixed-use development. Ground floor, retail and restaurant space. Floors 2 to 4, small business offices and artisan studios. Floor 5, community event space. Estimated cost, $1.2 million. Funding, combination of historic tax credits, community development loans, investor partnerships, and pre-leasing deposits from anchor tenants. Total timeline, 3 to 5 years from start to full occupancy. It was audacious. It was ambitious. It was probably insane. But it was possible. On their last night, before heading back to pack up their apartment, Maya and Sophie returned to the factory alone. Maya unlocked the main door and they stepped inside, the space dark except for moonlight streaming through those huge windows. You know what we still haven't figured out? Sophie's voice echoed in the vast space. What? How to open that door on the 5th floor. Maya had forgotten about it again. In the chaos of planning and meetings and decisions, the locked door had slipped her mind. You're right. Let's try one more time. They climbed the stairs together, flashlight beams bouncing off walls and ceiling. At the 5th floor, Maya stood in front of the iron door and tried each key on the ring again. None fit. There has to be another key somewhere, Sophie said. Maybe in those boxes we found. They went back down to the first floor. Maya pulled out the metal boxes from the floor compartment and went through them more carefully. In the last box, tucked into an envelope marked "For the Future," she found another key, smaller than the others, made of brass that had tarnished with age, and a note in Margaret's handwriting. The heart of the factory, the reason for everything. Open it when you're ready to understand. Maya and Sophie climbed back to the 5th floor. The small brass key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. The door opened with a whisper of air that smelled like time itself, old paper and silk and secrets kept for decades. Maya shone her flashlight inside. The room was massive, running the full length of the building. And it was filled with cocoons. Not real silkworm cocoons. Sculptures of them. Hundreds of white silk sculptures hanging from the ceiling on nearly invisible threads, each one about 3 feet long, glowing in the flashlight beam like captured moonlight. Sophie gasped. It's beautiful! Maya stepped inside carefully. The cocoons swayed slightly in the air currents, creating ripples of movement across the entire space. It was like standing inside a dream, inside transformation itself. But there was more. Between the cocoons, hanging on the walls, were paintings. Dozens of them. Silk paintings in traditional Chinese style. Landscapes, flowers, birds, dragons, phoenixes, each one more beautiful than the last. Margaret painted these, Maya breathed. This was her art studio. At the far end of the room stood an easel with a half-finished painting. A silk factory with open doors, light pouring out, and a woman standing in the doorway with her arms open wide. The woman looked like Margaret, or maybe she looked like Maya. It was hard to tell. Beside the easel was a wooden chest. Maya opened it. Inside were more paintings, carefully wrapped and labeled. Each label included a date, a title, and an estimated value. Maya's hands shook as she read the values. $15,000, $30,000, $50,000, some as high as $200,000. At the bottom of the chest was a leather portfolio. Maya opened it and found a letter from an art appraiser dated 6 months before Margaret's death. Dear Mrs. Liang, I have completed my assessment of your complete works as requested. The collection includes 847 individual pieces spanning 5 decades of work. Based on current market conditions and the quality of the pieces, I estimate the collection's total value at approximately $362 million. You asked whether these works could sustain a museum endowment. The answer is yes, absolutely. A collection of this caliber and historical significance could endow a major institution in perpetuity. However, I must note that these works are currently unknown to the art world. Your insistence on privacy means they have never been exhibited, published, or sold. To realize their full value, they would need proper authentication, exhibition, and market introduction. A process that would take years but would establish your legacy as one of the most significant Chinese-American artists of the 20th century. Maya read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. $362 million. The room spun. Sophie was still exclaiming over the cocoon sculptures, running between them, making them sway and dance. She had no idea what they just found. Maya sank to the floor, the letter clutched in her hands. Margaret hadn't just left her a factory. She'd left her a fortune hidden in plain sight, a lifetime of art that no one knew existed. This changed everything. With this collection, Maya could restore the factory 20 times over. She could ensure Sophie's future through college and beyond. She could prove to every person who'd ever doubted her that she was worth something after all. But as she sat in that room full of silk cocoons and priceless art, Maya understood something else. Margaret could have sold these paintings any time, could have lived in luxury instead of closing the factory and living simply, could have used this fortune to buy back her family's approval or to prove she'd been successful despite their rejection. She'd chosen not to. She'd kept the art hidden, kept creating it in secret, and left it all to Maya with a simple message: for the future. Not for revenge, not for validation, for the future, for transformation. Just like silkworms spun cocoons and emerged as something completely different, Margaret had transformed rejection into art, pain into beauty, isolation into legacy. And now she was giving Maya the same chance. Sophie appeared beside her, breathless from running. Mommy, this is the best room ever. Can we keep it exactly like this? Please. Maya looked up at the hundreds of cocoons swaying gently overhead, each one representing transformation, possibility, the courage to become something new. Yeah, baby. We're keeping it exactly like this. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat in the motel room with Sophie curled beside her, the appraisal letter spread on the cheap bedside table, and tried to process what she discovered. $362 million in art that no one knew existed. The number was so large it stopped meaning anything. It was abstract, impossible, the kind of sum that existed only in news articles about billionaires and lottery winners. But those paintings were real. Maya had touched them, seen the delicate brushwork, felt the silk they were painted on. Each one was a piece of Margaret's soul, created in secret over 50 years, hidden away in a locked room like a treasure no one was meant to find. Except Margaret had left her the key. Maya's phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Rachel Kim. I know it's early, but I couldn't sleep. I've been thinking about your project, and I have some ideas about potential anchor tenants. Can we meet for breakfast? Maya looked at Sophie, still sleeping, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Rachel, I need to tell you something. Can you come to the factory? 9 o'clock. Of course. Is everything okay? I'm not sure. Just come see. Maya woke Sophie gently, got her dressed, and they drove to the factory as the sun rose over Millbrook. The building looked different now. Not just a restoration project, but a vault containing one of the largest art collections anyone had never heard of. Rachel arrived exactly at 9, carrying coffee and a folder full of tenant proposals. Her smile faded when she saw Maya's face. What happened? Did Hastings threaten you? Did something go wrong with the loan? I opened the 5th floor. Rachel's eyes widened. And? You need to see it. They climbed the stairs together, Sophie running ahead, excited to show Rachel the cocoon room. Maya unlocked the door and let Rachel step inside first. Rachel stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. The morning light streaming through the huge windows made the silk cocoons glow like lanterns. The paintings on the walls seemed to shimmer, coming alive in the natural light. My God, Rachel whispered. There are 847 pieces total, Maya said quietly. Margaret created them over 5 decades. Never sold one, never exhibited them, never told anyone they existed. She handed Rachel the appraisal letter. Rachel read it slowly, her hands beginning to shake. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her face. $362 million. Maya, do you understand what this means? That I don't need loans or grants or tax credits. That I can write a check for whatever the factory needs. That's not what I mean. Rachel moved deeper into the room, studying the paintings with the reverence of someone who understood art history. Margaret Leong was unknown. She closed the factory in 1985 and disappeared from public life. We assumed she lived quietly, maybe painted as a hobby. But this, Rachel gestured at the walls. This is museum-quality work. Traditional Chinese silk painting techniques, combined with contemporary themes. She was documenting Chinese-American life, labor, immigration, love, struggle, 50 years of history captured in silk and ink. This isn't just valuable. It's historically significant. It belongs in museums. Sophie was making the cocoon sculpture sway, creating waves of movement across the ceiling. Mommy says we're keeping the room exactly like this. Rachel looked at Maya. What are you going to do? Maya had been asking herself the same question all night. I don't know. Sell a few pieces to fund the restoration? Keep the rest private? Donate them to a museum? Any of those would be reasonable. But there's another option. Rachel pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. I have a friend, Dr. Maya Chen, no relation, who's a curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She specializes in Chinese American art. If I told her about this collection, she'd be on the next train here. I'm not ready for that. I just found out about this 12 hours ago. I understand. But Maya, hiding this collection does a disservice to Margaret's legacy and to history. She created these works for a reason. She left them to you for a reason. Not just to make you rich, but to be shared. Maya looked at the half-finished painting on the easel, the woman standing in the factory doorway with her arms open wide. Welcoming. Inviting. Not hiding. Let me think about it. I need to process this first. Rachel nodded. Take whatever time you need. But know this, once word gets out about a $362 million art collection hidden in a silk factory, your life is going to change dramatically. Media, collectors, museums, the IRS, your family. Everyone will want a piece of this. Maya's stomach dropped. She hadn't thought about her family, about David, about everyone who dismissed her, suddenly learning she was sitting on a fortune. How do I keep it quiet? You don't. Not for long. Small town, big discovery. Someone will talk. My advice: control the narrative before someone else does. Tell the story yourself. On your terms. Sophie had stopped playing with the cocoons and was listening to the adults with the focused intensity of a child who understood something important was happening. Mommy, are we going to be rich? Maya knelt beside her daughter. Maybe, baby. If we decide to sell some of the paintings. Will Daddy try to take them? The question hit Maya like a punch. Sophie was 6 years old and already understood that money meant conflict, that her father would come circling the moment he smelled opportunity. Daddy can't take what belongs to us. These paintings are ours. The factory is ours. Nothing can change that. But even as she said it, Maya knew it wasn't entirely true. David would file for increased child support, claiming Maya had hidden assets. Her family would emerge from years of silence to demand their share of what they'd see as inherited wealth that should have gone to them. Lawyers, accountants, appraisers, tax authorities, all would want documentation, proof, their piece of the fortune. Rachel seemed to read her thoughts. You need a lawyer. A good one. Someone who specializes in estates and intellectual property and can protect you from the vultures who are going to descend. I can't afford a lawyer like that. You can now. Take one painting, get it properly authenticated and appraised, sell it privately. That will give you liquid capital to hire the legal protection you need before going public with the rest. It made sense, but it also meant making decisions Maya wasn't prepared to make. Which painting to sell first? How to authenticate it without revealing the entire collection? Who to trust when everyone would have their own agenda? I need help, Maya said quietly. I don't know how to do any of this. Rachel put a hand on her shoulder. That's why I'm here, and why we're going to call in reinforcements. Over the next week, Maya's life transformed into something unrecognizable. Rachel brought in Dr. Maya Chen from the Met, who spent 3 days examining the collection with mounting excitement. Sarah was methodical, photographing each piece, documenting techniques and materials, comparing Margaret's work to known masters of Chinese silk painting. On the 3rd day, she sat with Maya in the Cocoon room and delivered her assessment. Margaret Liang was entirely self-taught based on what I can determine. She learned traditional techniques from books and from studying pieces her family had imported before they disowned her. But she developed her own style, something between classical Gongbi precision and contemporary expressionism. Sarah pulled up images on her tablet showing details from Margaret's paintings alongside works by famous Chinese artists. Look at this landscape. The technique is traditional, but the subject matter is purely American. This is the Millbrook Town Square, painted with the same attention to natural detail that ancient Chinese masters gave to sacred mountains. She was bridging cultures, documenting her adopted home with the artistic language of her heritage. What does that mean for the collection's value? It means the $362 million appraisal was conservative. If these works were properly introduced to the market, authenticated, exhibited at major institutions, published in academic journals, I'd estimate the collection at $500 million or more. Margaret Liang could become recognized as one of the most significant Chinese-American artists of the 20th century. Sophie was sitting nearby, coloring in a sketchbook Sarah had brought for her. Is my great-great-aunt famous now? Sarah smiled. She's going to be, if your mother agrees to let the world see her work. Maya felt the weight of that decision. Margaret had chosen privacy, had hidden these paintings for 50 years. Was it Maya's right to thrust Margaret into posthumous fame? But then she remembered the letter Margaret had left. For the future. Not for the past, not for preservation, but for what could be built from it. What would you recommend? Maya asked Sarah. Start with a single exhibition at the Met. 50 pieces, carefully curated to tell Margaret's story. Let scholars study the work. Let the art world discover her. Once she's established, you can decide what to do with the rest. Sell some to fund whatever projects you want. Donate others to museums. Keep your favorites private, but let Margaret's voice be heard first. Rachel had been listening quietly. Now she spoke. And fund the factory restoration from the exhibition proceeds. Show the world that Margaret's art is financing the preservation of her life's work. That's a story that will resonate. It was perfect, but it also meant going public with everything. No more hiding, no more quiet decisions. Once the Met announced a major exhibition of previously unknown works by a Chinese-American master, the media would descend. Everyone would want to know about the granddaughter who'd inherited a fortune hidden in a factory. I need to talk to a lawyer first. Make sure David can't claim any of this. Make sure my family can't contest Margaret's will. Protect myself before I put a target on my back. Rachel had anticipated this. I already reached out to someone. Catherine Martinez, estate attorney out of New York. She specializes in high-value inheritances and family disputes. She's expecting your call. Maya called that afternoon. Catherine Martinez had a voice that carried authority and warmth in equal measure. Miss Chen, Rachel filled me in on your situation. Before we discuss anything else, I need to confirm the factory and its contents were left to you explicitly in Margaret Liang's will. Yes, I have the documents. Good. That makes you the sole owner of everything on the property, including any artwork found there. Your ex-husband has no claim to inherited assets. They're not marital property. Your extended family members would need to contest the will, which sounds unlikely to succeed given that Margaret was of sound mind and had clear intentions. Maya felt some tension release from her shoulders. So I'm protected? Legally, yes. But I strongly recommend we take several steps before you go public with this discovery. First, establish a trust to hold the artwork and factory property. That provides liability protection and tax advantages. Second, get formal appraisals on at least 10 representative pieces to establish the collection's value for insurance and estate purposes. Third, secure the factory immediately. Better locks, security system, insurance policy that covers the full value of the contents. The list went on. Each item essential, each one expensive, each one more proof that Maya's life had transformed overnight from struggling single mother to custodian of a fortune. How much will all this cost? Probably $50,000 to $100,000 to do it properly. But Miss Chen, you're sitting on $500 million in art. That's a rounding error. My advice is to select one painting, get it authenticated and appraised, and sell it privately to cover your immediate expenses. Then we build the proper legal and financial structure before you go public with the rest. It made sense, but it also meant choosing which of Margaret's paintings to sell first, which felt like a betrayal of the woman who'd created them in secret and left them for Maya to protect. That evening, Maya stood in the Cocoon room alone, studying each painting, trying to decide. Sophie was with Rachel, who'd volunteered to babysit while Maya made difficult decisions. The factory was silent except for the soft rustle of silk cocoons swaying in the draft from the open door. How did you choose which piece of someone's soul to sell? Maya found herself drawn to one painting near the back wall. It showed two women, one clearly Chinese and one clearly Italian, standing together in front of a factory. Their hands were clasped, their faces turned toward the viewer with expressions of defiant joy. Margaret and a woman who must have been Tony's mother or sister. The two families that had rejected their marriage, represented by the women who'd chosen to support them anyway. The painting was titled, in English and Chinese characters, Family We Choose. It was perfect for sale, beautiful enough to command a high price, thematically clear enough to tell Margaret's story, but not so personal that losing it would feel like losing a piece of Margaret herself. Maya took careful photographs from every angle, documenting the painting's condition and details. Then she called Catherine Martinez. I've chosen one to sell. What's next? I'll connect you with a private dealer who specializes in Chinese art. She can authenticate it quietly and find a buyer who values discretion. Expect $2 to $3 million for a piece of this quality if the authentication confirms what we think it is. $2 to $3 million for one painting out of 847. Maya's head spun. The authentication process took 3 weeks. The painting was removed carefully, transported to a secure facility in New York, examined by experts who confirmed it was genuine silk painted with traditional materials consistent with someone trained in Chinese techniques. The brushwork was extraordinary, the composition sophisticated, the historical significance undeniable. The private dealer sold it within 2 days for $2.8 million. The press release was carefully crafted. The Met is proud to present Silk and Transformation, the hidden works of Margaret Liang, featuring 50 newly discovered paintings by Chinese-American artist Margaret Liang, 1925 to 2024. This unprecedented exhibition showcases 5 decades of work by an entirely self-taught master who documented Chinese-American life with traditional silk painting techniques. The collection was discovered by Liang's great-niece in the artist's former silk factory in Millbrook, New York. The media response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, Maya's phone was flooded with interview requests from the New York Times, NPR, CNN, and dozens of other outlets. Art blogs exploded with speculation about the collection's value. Social media lit up with images of Margaret's paintings, shared thousands of times, debated and analyzed and praised. Rachel's prediction had been correct. Maya's life changed instantly. Reporters showed up in Millbrook, filming the factory exterior, interviewing townspeople, trying to piece together Margaret's story. Carol gave a carefully prepared statement about Margaret being a respected community member. The mayor talked about the factory's historic significance. Rachel spoke about the artwork's cultural importance. Maya gave one interview to the Times, carefully explaining how she discovered the collection and her plans to use proceeds to restore the factory and honor Margaret's legacy. "Margaret left me more than paintings," Maya told the reporter. "She left me a model for how to build something beautiful from rejection. How to create art not for fame or fortune, but because it needed to exist. I'm just trying to honor that." The article ran on the front page of the art section with photographs of the Cocoon room and several of Margaret's paintings. The headline read, "Hidden Fortune: How a Nursing Assistant Inherited $500 million in Secret Art and a Second Chance." Maya's phone rang within minutes of the article going live. "David, of course. I'm filing for full custody and back child support. You've been hiding assets while claiming poverty. My lawyer says you owe me hundreds of thousands in recalculated support payments." Maya had prepared for this moment with Catherine's guidance. "David, any lawyer worth their fee will tell you that inherited assets aren't marital property and don't affect child support calculations. You're welcome to file whatever you want. My legal team will respond appropriately." "Your legal team?" He laughed bitterly. 2 months ago, you were begging me for grocery money. Now you're talking about legal teams. 2 months ago, I was surviving. Now I'm building something. There's a difference. And you don't get to be part of it just because you happen to be Sophie's father. We'll see what the courts say. Yes, we will. Goodbye, David. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking, but it was adrenaline, not fear. David could file anything he wanted. Catherine had already assured her that he had no legal claim to Margaret's estate or the artwork. Her family called next. Aunt Jennifer, her mother's sister, who hadn't spoken to Maya in 3 years. "Maya, sweetheart, we're so happy for you. Your uncle and I were just saying how proud your mother would be. We'd love to come visit, see the factory, catch up." "Catch up?" "You didn't return my calls when Sophie was in the hospital. You didn't help when we were facing eviction. But now that I'm in the Times, suddenly you want to catch up. That's not fair. We've been dealing with our own difficulties. Families should support each other." "You're right. Families should support each other. Which is why I'm establishing a scholarship fund for young Chinese-American women pursuing careers in art. In my mother's name. Since you all pretended she stopped existing after she married my father." Maya hung up on her aunt's sputtered protests. Sophie appeared in the doorway, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm. "Was that Aunt Jennifer?" "Yeah. Is she mad we're rich now?" "I think she's mad she wasn't nice to us before we were rich." Sophie considered this with the philosophical gravity of a 6-year-old. "That's dumb. You're supposed to be nice to people always, not just when they have money." "You're absolutely right, baby. Can we go see the factory?" "I miss the Cocoon room." They drove over that afternoon. The factory was transformed, new roof gleaming, windows replaced with historically appropriate replicas, the exterior cleaned to reveal the beautiful red. Maya was sitting in Ruby's with Sophie when Catherine called with the news. Her hand shook so badly, she nearly dropped the phone. The funds will be transferred to your new trust account within 48 hours. You now have the capital to properly establish your legal protections, secure the factory, and begin renovation work while we plan the Met exhibition. After hanging up, Maya sat in stunned silence. Carol came over with coffee she hadn't ordered. You okay, hon? You look like you've seen a ghost. I just sold a painting for $2.8 million. Carol didn't even blink. That the artwork from the 5th floor Rachel mentioned. How does everyone in this town know everything? Small town, big news. And before you worry, nobody's talking outside Millbrook. We protect our own. But you should know that Robert Hastings has been asking questions. Heard you found something valuable in the factory. He's offering $3 million now for the property. Maya laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. $3 million for a building containing $500 million in art. What a bargain. You going to tell him what you found? Eventually, everyone will know. The Met is planning an exhibition. But I want the legal protections in place first. Want to make sure no one can take this away from us. Sophie looked up from her pancakes. Mommy, are we rich now? Yeah, baby. We are. Can we get a cat? Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of syrup and children's shampoo. We can get a whole shelter full of cats if you want. Just one cat. And maybe keep the factory. Definitely keeping the factory. The legal work moved quickly once money was no object. Catherine established the Chen Family Trust, transferred ownership of the factory and all artwork into it, secured a $50 million insurance policy covering the collection, and installed a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. Maya hired contractors to begin emergency repairs on the factory, new roof, sealed windows, climate control systems to protect the paintings, reinforced doors and locks. The building transformed from derelict to secured within 6 weeks. She also hired staff, a property manager to oversee the renovation work, an art conservator to catalog and preserve the collection, an accountant to manage the trust finances, a publicist to prepare for the media storm that would come when the Met made their announcement. Each hire felt surreal. Maya, who'd been working as a nursing assistant 2 months ago, was now someone who employed people, who made decisions involving millions of dollars, who received calls from museum directors and art collectors and journalists who'd somehow heard rumors about a major discovery. Through it all, Sophie adapted with the resilience of childhood. She started at Millbrook Elementary, made friends immediately, and seemed entirely unbothered by the fact that her mother had gone from struggling single parent to custodian of a historic art collection in the span of 8 weeks. Emma's mom wants to know if we can have a play date at the factory, Sophie announced one evening. Maya and Sophie were living in a rented house now, a proper 3-bedroom with a yard where Sophie had already identified the perfect spot for the cat she was still campaigning for. The eviction notice from their old apartment was a distant memory, though Maya kept it folded in her wallet as a reminder of where they'd been. You told your friends about the factory? Just that it's really big and has cool art. Emma wants to see the Cocoon room. Maybe when the construction is finished and it's safer. Right now there are workers everywhere. Okay, can Emma come here instead? Watching Sophie play in the yard with a friend, both of them shrieking with laughter over something only 6-year-olds found hilarious, Maya felt something settle in her chest. This was what Margaret had wanted. Not just financial security, but the freedom to live fully, to build friendships and community, to not be defined by rejection or struggle. The Metropolitan Museum of Art announced the Margaret Liang exhibition in January, 4 months after Maya had first opened the factory door. Brick beneath decades of grime. Contractors were working on the interior, converting the ground floor into gallery and retail space, the upper floors into studios and offices. But the 5th floor remained untouched except for climate control and security improvements. The Cocoon room was exactly as Margaret had left it, preserved as the heart of the building. Maya and Sophie stood in the center, surrounded by silk cocoons that caught the winter sunlight and glowed like captured stars. Mommy, did Great-Great-Aunt Margaret know we'd find all this? I think she hoped we would. I think she planned for it. Why did she hide everything for so long? Maya thought about Margaret's story. About a woman who'd been rejected by her family, who'd built a business and a life with a man she loved despite everyone saying it was impossible. who'd created beauty in secret, not for recognition, but because the creating itself was what mattered. I think she was waiting for the right person to share it with, someone who would understand why she made the choices she did, someone who wouldn't just see money, but would see the story behind it. And she picked you. She picked us. Sophie ran to the easel where Margaret's unfinished painting still stood, the woman in the factory doorway with her arms open wide. Mommy, this lady looks like you. Maya studied the painting more carefully. Sophie was right. The woman's features were indistinct, but her posture, her gesture of welcome, even the way she stood with one hand on the doorframe, it all echoed the way Maya had stood in this exact doorway the first time she'd opened it. Margaret hadn't painted herself. She'd painted the person she hoped would come after her. The person who would open doors she kept closed, who would share what she kept hidden, who would transform her legacy into something that could touch the world. She painted Maya before Maya had even arrived. The Met exhibition opened in April to unprecedented crowds. Lines wrapped around the block. Art critics called Margaret Liang a revelation, a master who'd worked in isolation and emerged with a body of work that rivaled any contemporary painter. Maya attended the opening with Sophie, both of them dressed in traditional Chinese silk, clothing that Rachel had helped them find. They stood in the gallery, surrounded by Margaret's paintings, watching strangers experience the beauty that had been hidden for so long. A woman in her 70s approached, tears streaming down her face. Are you Margaret's great niece? Yes. I'm Maya. I'm Helen Wu. My parents came to America in 1950, worked in factories just like the one Margaret painted. These images, she gestured at the paintings surrounding them. These are my childhood, my parents' lives, our community story, documented by someone who understood because she lived it too. Helen clasped Maya's hands. Thank you for sharing these, for letting the world see us, for making our history visible. Maya talked to dozens of people that night. Chinese Americans who saw their families reflected in Margaret's work. Art historians excited by the discovery. Students planning dissertations on Margaret's techniques. Museum directors already inquiring about borrowing pieces for their own exhibitions. The paintings sold at auction 2 months later, with all proceeds going to the factory restoration and the scholarship fund Maya had established. 15 pieces went to private collectors for an average of $4 million each. 10 went to museums for slightly lower prices. 25 pieces Maya kept for the permanent collection that would be housed in the restored factory. The total raised $87 million. More than enough to complete the factory renovation, fund scholarships in perpetuity, and establish a trust that would ensure Sophie's future and support the Millbrook community for generations. The factory reopened 18 months after Maya first walked through its doors. The grand opening celebration filled the building with people, townspeople who'd supported Maya from the beginning, artists who'd applied for studio space, business owners who'd leased retail locations, and families who'd come to see the Margaret Liang Gallery that now occupied the 5th floor. The Cocoon room remained, expanded with additional sculptures Maya had commissioned from local artists. But now it served as an event space, a place where transformation was celebrated literally and metaphorically. Maya stood on the main floor and looked up at the restored building, sunlight streaming through clean windows, the original iron columns gleaming, the space full of life and purpose and possibility. Rachel appeared beside her with champagne. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. I couldn't have done this alone. True. But you're the one who chose to try. You could have taken Hastings's money and walked away. Instead, you gambled on Margaret's vision and your own courage. Sophie was running through the crowd with her new cat. They'd gotten one from the shelter, a calico named Butterfly, showing it to anyone who'd look. She'd grown 3 inches in the past year and a half, lost 2 teeth, and developed an enthusiasm for art that suggested she might follow in her great-great-aunt's footsteps. Carol from Ruby's wandered over with a plate of appetizers. Quite a transformation. From condemned building to the crown jewel of Millbrook. It's still strange to think about, Maya admitted. 2 years ago I was facing eviction. Now I'm running a historic property and an art gallery. 2 years ago you were surviving. Now you're building. There's a difference. Carol smiled. Margaret knew what she was doing when she chose you. As the celebration continued, Maya slipped away to the 5th floor, to the Cocoon room that had started everything. The silk sculptures swayed gently in the climate-controlled air. Margaret's remaining paintings hung on the walls, carefully preserved, available for anyone who wanted to see them. On the easel, Maya had finally finished Margaret's last painting, the woman in the doorway with arms open wide. But she'd added something, a small girl standing beside the woman, reaching up to hold her hand. Maya and Sophie, painted in the style Margaret had perfected, present and future, connected by art and legacy and the courage to transform rejection into something beautiful. A plaque beside the painting read, "Family We Choose, Completion by Margaret Liang and Maya Chen 2024 to 2026. Margaret had given Maya keys to locked doors, both literal and metaphorical. She'd shown her that being chosen once was enough, that rejection didn't define you unless you let it, that building something beautiful was the best response to people who said you'd fail. And Maya had taken those lessons and transformed them into this, a building full of life, a community revitalized, a legacy honored, and a daughter who would grow up knowing that courage and vision could turn factories into galleries, cocoons into butterflies, struggle into strength. The factory wasn't just restored, it was reborn. And so was Maya. She stood in the cocoon room, surrounded by silk and light and possibility, and finally understood what Margaret had known all along. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property or even priceless art. Sometimes it's simply being chosen by someone who believes you're capable of extraordinary things. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to try, they're right. 3 years after the grand opening, Maya stood in her office on the 4th floor of the factory, reviewing applications for the Margaret Liang Artist Residency Program. 23 artists had applied for 3 available positions, each one bringing their own story of struggle and aspiration. The office was modest but comfortable, with windows overlooking the Millbrook Town Square. Maya had insisted on keeping the original wooden floors and exposed brick walls, wanting to preserve the factory's industrial character even as it transformed into something new. Sophie burst through the door, now 9 years old, and full of the boundless energy that came with being a child who'd never known real poverty. She'd been too young to fully remember the eviction notice, the nights when dinner was crackers and hope, the fear that had colored every decision Maya made. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson says the elementary school wants to do a field trip here next month. Can I help give the tours?" Maya smiled. Sophie had appointed herself unofficial ambassador of the factory, eager to share its history with anyone who'd listen. "You'll have to check with the education coordinator. But I think that would be wonderful. And can I show them the cocoon room? That's everyone's favorite part. As long as you remember not to touch the artwork." Sophie rolled her eyes with the exasperation of a child who'd heard this rule 1,000 times. "I know, Mom. I've lived here my whole life practically." Not her whole life, Maya thought. Just the good part. The part that came after Margaret's gift had transformed everything. After Sophie left to find the education coordinator, Maya returned to the residency applications. She'd established the program a year ago, offering 3 emerging artists free studio space, a small stipend, and mentorship for 6 months. The first cohort had been wildly successful. 2 of the 3 artists had gone on to gallery representation, and 1 had won a regional award for her work. One application caught Maya's eye. Jennifer Tran, 24, Vietnamese-American, recently graduated from art school and struggling to find her voice while working 3 jobs to pay rent in Philadelphia. The personal statement was raw and honest. "My family doesn't understand why I want to make art instead of becoming a doctor or lawyer. They see art as a hobby, not a life. I'm trying to prove them wrong, but it's hard when I'm so tired from working that I barely have energy to paint. This residency would give me time to focus on my work and find my community." Maya saw herself in those words. The struggle to be taken seriously, the exhaustion of surviving while trying to create, the isolation of pursuing a dream that everyone around you dismissed as foolishness. She marked Jennifer's application as a top candidate and moved to the next one. Her phone rang. Catherine Martinez, who'd become not just Maya's attorney but a trusted friend. "Maya, I'm calling with news about David's latest legal maneuver." Maya's stomach tightened. David had been filing motions and appeals for 3 years, each one more frivolous than the last. He'd lost every single case. The courts had consistently ruled that Margaret's estate was Maya's inherited property and had no bearing on child support calculations. "What is it this time?" He's filed for a portion of Sophie's future inheritance, claiming that since she's his daughter, he should have control over any trust funds established for her benefit. Maya felt rage bubble up, hot and immediate. He wants to control Sophie's trust fund? The one I established specifically to protect her from him. That's what he's claiming. But Maya, this is actually good news. His lawyer is arguing that David deserves access because Sophie is a minor and he's her father. But by making this argument, he's essentially admitting that all his previous claims about the estate being marital property were baseless. He's undermining his own case. So he's going to lose again. Spectacularly. And I'm going to request that the judge issue a permanent order barring him from filing any further claims related to Margaret's estate. We can finally end this. After hanging up, Maya walked to the window and looked out at Millbrook. The town had transformed along with the factory. 3 new restaurants had opened on Main Street, a bookstore, an art supply shop. The empty storefronts that had defined the downtown when Maya first arrived were now filled with thriving businesses, all of them benefiting from the steady stream of visitors who came to see the Margaret Leon Gallery. The factory hadn't just survived. It had become a catalyst for the entire community's renewal. Carol from Ruby's had expanded her diner, adding a second location near the factory that served lunch to the artists, office workers, and tourists who filled the building daily. The mayor had credited the factory restoration with adding $12 million to the local economy and creating over 100 jobs. Maya had done that. With Margaret's gift and Rachel's support and the community's embrace, she built something that mattered. But David still couldn't let go. Still couldn't accept that Maya had succeeded without him, that his daughter was thriving in his absence, that the woman he'd dismissed as a failure had become someone of significance. Sophie appeared beside Maya, pressing against her side the way she used to when she was smaller. Was that about Dad? Maya put an arm around her daughter. Yeah. He's trying to get control of your trust fund. He won't win, right? You said he never wins. He won't win. But it's frustrating that he keeps trying. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said something that broke Maya's heart with its wisdom. I think he's mad that we're happy. That we have the factory and Butterfly and friends here. He thought we'd always need him, and when we didn't, it made him feel small. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more now that you're not so tired all the time. Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of the art supplies Sophie had been using in the youth studio downstairs. This was what Margaret had given them, not just money, but the space to breathe, to grow, to become the people they were meant to be. That evening, Maya hosted a dinner for the factory's anchor tenants, the businesses and artists who'd taken a chance on leasing space in the restored building. 10 people gathered in the event space on the 3rd floor, sharing food and wine and stories about the past 3 years. James Park, who ran a graphic design studio on the 2nd floor, raised his glass. I want to propose a toast to Maya, who believed this place could be more than a relic, who saw possibility where others saw problems, and who created a community where artists and entrepreneurs can actually thrive. Everyone clinked glasses, and Maya felt tears prick her eyes. These people had become her extended family, the family she'd chosen, just like Margaret had chosen her. Rachel stood next. I want to add something. 3 years ago, Robert Hastings stood in the town council meeting and said that saving the factory was a fool's errand, that it would bankrupt whoever tried it, that it would remain an eyesore, that Millbrook should just accept its decline. I want everyone here to remember that when people tell you something is impossible, they're usually just afraid of the work it would take to make it possible. More applause. Maya saw Carol dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. After dinner, Maya walked through the factory alone, something she did most evenings. She'd learned every creak of the floorboards, every quirk of the climate control system, every spot where the afternoon light painted the walls gold. The building had become more than property to her. It was a living thing, breathing with the activity of the people who filled it, humming with creative energy, standing as proof that rejection didn't have to be the end of the story. She ended up in the Cocoon room, as she always did. The silk sculptures glowed in the dimmed evening lights, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Margaret's paintings surrounded her, the ones Maya had kept for the permanent collection, refusing to sell no matter how high the offers went. These were the pieces that told Margaret's most personal stories. Her wedding day, the first day the factory opened, the moment she learned her family had refused to attend Tony's funeral. The years of quiet creation in this very room, building a body of work that no one knew existed. Maya had added new pieces to the room over the years. A portrait of Margaret that she'd commissioned from one of the residency artists, based on old photographs. A timeline of the factory's history, from 1923 to the present, showing the building's evolution. And a wall of photographs showing all the people who'd been part of the restoration. Contractors, artists, volunteers, community members who'd given their time and expertise to bring Margaret's vision into the present. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie, who was at a friend's house for a sleepover. Mrs. Patterson says I can help with the field trip. I'm going to write a whole speech about great-great-Aunt Margaret. Maya smiled and texted back. That's wonderful, baby. I can't wait to hear it. Another text came through, this one from Jennifer Tran, the artist whose residency application had moved her. Miss Chen, I just received the acceptance email. I don't have words to express what this means to me. Thank you for believing in artists like me. Thank you for creating this opportunity. I promise I'll make the most of it. Maya typed back. I believe in you because someone once believed in me when I had nothing but potential and desperation. Pay it forward when you can. That's all Margaret would have wanted. She thought about the chain of gifts that had brought her here. Margaret receiving rejection and responding with art. Margaret leaving that art to Maya. Maya choosing to honor the gift by building something that would outlast both of them. And now Maya passing that opportunity to another generation of artists who needed someone to believe in them. This was how legacies worked. Not through blood or obligation, but through choosing to lift up the people who came after you, giving them the tools and space and faith they needed to become extraordinary. Maya heard footsteps on the stairs. Rachel appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might be up here. You always are after dinner parties. It's my favorite room. The heart of everything. Rachel handed her a glass, and they stood together, looking at Margaret's paintings. Do you ever regret it? Rachel asked. Not selling more of the collection? You could have been a billionaire if you'd sold everything. I have enough. More than enough. Sophie's future is secure. The factory is thriving. We're helping artists and revitalizing the community. What would I do with $1 billion that I can't do with what I have? Most people would find something. Most people didn't grow up the way I did. Didn't learn that money is just a tool, not a destination. Maya sipped her wine. Margaret taught me that. She had $362 million in art and lived in a small apartment, drove an old car, spent her money on community causes instead of luxury. She understood that wealth was about what you could build and share, not what you could hoard. You've built something remarkable here. Margaret would be proud. I hope so. I think about her a lot. Wonder what she'd think of the factory now. Whether she'd approve of the choices I've made. Rachel gestured at the paintings around them. She left you everything with no conditions, no instructions, no requirements. That was her way of saying she trusted you to make the right choices. And you have. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 women who become friends through the shared work of restoration and renewal. Rachel had been promoted to director of the State Historical Society, a position that gave her oversight of preservation projects across New York. But she still came to Millbrook every week, still treated the factory as her special project, still believed in what they were building together. I have news, Rachel said finally. The National Park Service is considering the factory for National Historic Landmark status. If approved, it would be one of only a handful of Chinese-American sites with that designation. Maya felt her breath catch. Really? Really? The combination of the building's history, Margaret's art collection, and what you've done to preserve and activate the space makes it nationally significant. The application process will take a year or more, but I'm confident it'll be approved. National Historic Landmark status. The highest recognition a historic property could receive. It would bring more visitors, more attention, more responsibility. But it would also ensure that the factory would be protected forever, that Margaret's story would be part of America's official historical record. We should do it. Margaret's story deserves to be recognized that way. I thought you'd say that. I'll start the application process next week. After Rachel left, Maya remained in the Cocoon room, finishing her wine and thinking about trajectories. How a single decision, to drive to Millbrook instead of signing Hastings' check, had changed everything. How keeping the factory had led to discovering the art collection, which had led to the restoration, which had led to community renewal, which was now leading to national recognition. One brave choice, compounding over time into something far larger than she could have imagined. Her phone buzzed again. Catherine Martinez. Maya, I wanted you to hear this from me first. The judge issued his ruling on David's motion. Not only did he deny it, he issued a permanent injunction barring David from filing any further claims related to Margaret's estate or Sophie's trust fund. He also ordered David to pay your legal fees for defending against frivolous litigation. It's over. Completely over. Maya felt something unknot in her chest that had been tight for 3 years. It's really over. Really over. David can still see Sophie according to the custody agreement. That hasn't changed. But he can't harass you legally anymore. He can't try to claim your inheritance or control Sophie's trust. You're free. After hanging up, Maya sank into one of the chairs Margaret had used while painting. Free. The word echoed in her mind. She'd been fighting David for so long. First trying to save their marriage, then trying to survive the divorce, then defending herself against his legal attacks. That freedom felt almost foreign. What did you do when you weren't constantly preparing for the next assault? You built, she realized. You created. You helped others. You lived the life that Margaret had shown was possible. Maya pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app. She'd been thinking about expanding the residency program, maybe adding funding for artists to create new work inspired by Margaret's legacy. She sketched out ideas, calculated costs, made lists of people to contact. This was her life now. Not fighting, but building. Not surviving, but thriving. Not proving wrong the people who doubted her, but proving right the woman who believed in her. Sophie texted again. I love you, Mom. Thanks for making everything good. Maya typed back. I love you too, baby. Thanks for being brave with me. She turned off the lights in the Cocoon room, watching the silk sculptures fade into shadow. Tomorrow she'd come back, and the room would be full of light again, full of visitors who wanted to see Margaret's work, full of the constant renewal that came from opening doors instead of keeping them locked. Margaret had spent 50 years creating in secret, protecting her art from a world that had rejected her. Maya had spent 3 years sharing that art with anyone who wanted to see it, proving that Margaret's story deserved to be told. They'd both been right, Margaret for creating without need for recognition, Maya for recognizing that some stories were too important to keep hidden. As Maya walked down the stairs and out into the Millbrook evening, she thought about inheritance and legacy and the ways we choose to honor the people who believed in us. She thought about factories and cocoons and transformation. She thought about the long journey from eviction notice to National Historic Landmark nomination. And she thought about how grateful she was that a woman she'd met only once, decades ago, had seen something in a struggling 8-year-old that even that child couldn't see in herself. Margaret had painted transformation into silk, capturing the moment when something ordinary became extraordinary. But she'd also lived transformation, building a life of meaning from rejection and loss. And now Maya was doing the same, taking Margaret's gift and multiplying it, spreading it through community and art, and the simple revolutionary act of believing that people were worth investing in. The factory lights glowed behind her as she walked to her car. Inside those walls, artists were creating, businesses were thriving, and history was being preserved and celebrated. All because one woman had chosen to leave her legacy to someone who needed it, and that someone had chosen to honor the gift by sharing it with everyone who came after. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.